And he's gone.
Hello.
Hello.
We had a John strand there for a second, right?
Yeah, he came and
A
left.
sighting. Came and went.
He couldn't wait a minute.
Lucid as a giant octopus or squid or whatever.
It's like Sasquatch. Sasquatch. Oh, it's me.
Sasquatch. Yes, I get Sasquatch emails.
All right, so today we're back with Antisyphon live streams. We got Ryan the shootist here who makes us all look good and goes full screen on our faces and scares the heck out of us whenever we're talking about stuff. Yep, there it is. Thanks. That's right.
You're welcome.
We got Serena here to help engage with the audience. So if you're the audience, hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Damn it, Ryan, stop. And then we have the people who actually will be teaching us something today. We got Kent and Jorden. And if you've never had a Kent and Jorden class, this is how they do it. It's like the two of them together teaching, ripping off each other. I enjoy watching Kent and Jorden teach together because it's like these two people who have a bunch of kids together, just really enjoying teaching together. And when I say they have a bunch of kids together, Kent, Jorden, how many kids do you have?
Okay, so between the two of us, we are not married.
Right.
We are not intimately entwined.
Okay.
I have a lovely wife. Kent has a lovely wife.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Between us and our families, there are 9 children.
That's fantastic. And then before we continue, can you please do was it a mountain lion call?
Yes, I would love to. Here you go.
Okay, just one mountain lion call.
About 20 years ago. And it's a cat call. And I just scared my friend the other night in the woods. And he said, you may give someone a heart attack one day if they don't know this is coming. And it's just a quick little... So a cat call, like a legit mountain lion call in the wilderness.
But not that kind of
Yeah. All right, let's move on. All right, so Bondex Hellgrave, thanks for following. So Kent and Jorden, go ahead and jump right in. What you go talk about today, because I'm sure it's going to be fascinating.
You want to introduce the topics?
Oh, yeah, I could do that. I mean, I just found out about them a little bit ago. So today we're going to talk about developing a lab in Azure and spooling up some services that get exposed to the public internet. And we're going to talk about how long a service ends up on the internet before it starts getting attacked brutally by the rest of the internet. And then we're going to do some attribution about what's happening there, maybe where the attacks are coming from, and how we can do that and automate all of it inside of Azure and Azure Sentinel. So where do we start with that? I think we'd have to start with the lab generation. So Jorden and I teach a class. We teach a couple classes. But one of the classes uses a lab that essentially is developed inside of Azure and is super easy to deploy. It's doazlab.com. You just go there and you hit deploy, and you deploy it into your own Azure account. And I think, Jorden, are we going to do that, or did you already do that?
I'm going to walk through those few buttons. Yep, we're going to go through that. But really, I think another thing that's really interesting about this lab is we're intentionally luring attackers. We are really trying to build some actual threat intel that we can use for, what good is attribution these days? Hey, there's Russian IPs that are hitting our servers. There's some IPs from Hong Kong. There's some stuff in Great Britain. And they're smashing into our servers. But it does give us some real-time threat intel. We can see who's actually trying to log into our boxes right now. So we're building a lures-specific lab.
I think what's interesting about that is the threat feed piece, because you can go buy threat feed intelligence or something, easy buttons, but we're going to generate one, right? And what does that mean in the context of that? And I think what's interesting about it is, as pen testers, we try to keep from being attributed to our attacks. But what we see is hackers don't always do that. If you're looking for, attacks that are based on opportunity, they're not going to spend the time to set up a bunch of proxy chains and everything else to hide their source. They're just going to go right from their source, wherever they're at, or from a botnet. And yet the point is, with this threat feed intelligence, you can build it yourself. And kind of the goal behind it is that you're not having to pay for a service that is generalized. Someone else got attacked by this IP. This is specifically someone is attacking you. Specifically you, and what are you going to do about it? Not someone else on the internet. Now, there is lots of value in that, but there's also value in knowing when someone's attacking you and what you can do to prevent them, what you can do to react to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we screen sharing, or Ryan, do you want to share?
Yep, here you are.
Appreciate that. So this is doazlab.com. And for those of you familiar with ARM templates, this button right here called Deploy to Azure is a UI definitions file. So this links out to our GitHub, which is also linked. Not that one, but I can click this. We'll open that in a new tab, and then we can go see some code going on here. But this button is the same as this button. And it's called the UI definitions file. And then when I click this to deploy the initial lab environment, it's going to prompt me to authenticate some things. I may have to enter a code here in just a second. But what happens is the first thing it asks me is, hey, where do you want to put this in your Azure account? And so we're going to go ahead and drop a new resource group in here, BHIS live stream demo time. Okay, so we just created a new resource group to hold all of these things, these new resources we're going to deploy. And remember, this is a very specific intent. We want to create some lures, and that's 2 RDP systems and an SSH server. And then we're going to go look at what happens to those boxes after they come online. Though we're not going to wait for this lab to come online because that takes about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. We are just walking through this process to show you how easy it is to deploy an attribution lab in Azure.
What I think
we can wait. We can wait the 45 minutes. It was just sit here.
I got a tea time, buddy.
Anyways, so what's interesting about this too is that if you were to take these services, we're just spooling up like a couple Windows boxes and SSH box. If you were to do that in another environment, right, make it look like it's yours, give it one of your domain names or a subdomain of your domain, make it look like it's yours. That way, when you are being attacked, they do the reconnaissance, they find this host, and this is one of the hosts that they end up trying to attack. As soon as you see a password spray that comes from an IP, take that IP and just block it everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right?
Deny. It's a really straightforward process. So there's some interesting things in Windows event logs that I don't think people have seen before. And maybe just like the basics of looking at an event ID 4625, which is a failed logon. It includes our source IP address. The source IP address that failed a logon. That is incredibly useful information if you're gathering it or if you're putting it into use somehow in your environment. Now, a lot of us rely on these SIMs and technologies to make decisions for us, and we often don't know what's going on under the hood. So we are going to walk through some of these detections. Now, we did deploy a lab. We are going to go look at a different lab that we deployed a couple days ago. And why? Because we've got interesting data now and things that we can use to kind of build upon.
So this is a lab spooled up, exposed to the internet.
Yep.
How long did it take before we started seeing some logs?
I spooled this lab up Monday. What day is it? Wednesday, Monday morning. And by Monday afternoon, we have intel data that is, valid enough to go start making actionable threat intelligence related decisions. So this next link here, this Sentinel KQL, this one should be public as well and has about 8 or 10 Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel related queries. These are different ways of looking at the data we are receiving on these endpoints that are being attacked now.
Wait, what's Sentinel?
Oh yeah, let's go look at Sentinel.
We need to look at that first.
Yeah, for sure. So Sentinel is a Microsoft platform. And I don't know, do you want my opinions on stuff like this? Or do we just say Sentinel is a SIEM, and it's Microsoft's version of one?
I would also add that if you remember like 10 years ago, everybody was freaking out about the amount of heuristics that like every Windows machine would like start sending off to Microsoft in good faith that it was doing something beneficial for us. A decade later, they have a huge database of heuristics because of that you can apply to security metrics. And I think that's really interesting to see the pathway of this. Originally, when Jorden and I started looking at this and developing training material for it, Sentinel didn't exist, right? So we were actually looking back at like using El Cabana, using the Helk stack with Roberto Rodriguez. And we've kind of progressed forward, and now we're on Sentinel, and it's been super effective.
Yeah, for us, I'm going to go ahead and give you some opinions now. So if you didn't want any opinions, like I love Sentinel for 100 different reasons, and a couple of them being that I feel like in a few years, and probably not even that long, Microsoft is going to have one of the best EDR platforms integrated with this SIEM, integrated with all their intelligence. Yes, I mean, we're accepting the fact that Microsoft is gathering intelligence off of every one of its operating systems and every one of its endpoints and antivirus products, and it is using this intelligence to build better and better security platforms. And I really think EDR vendors are going to have a hard time competing with Microsoft in a few years.
Defender's getting stronger and stronger for sure.
It really is, yeah.
And that's the thing with Defender; it all plays together with Defender as well. So
inside Sentinel, it's kind of a data feed. Like we have a couple different types of data coming in here. One of them being syslog, and one of them being our log analytics agents that run on the Windows systems. And so we get Windows events and we get syslog out of our Linux box, right? This is intentional. Remember, we exposed a couple of RDP systems and we exposed an SSH server with the intent of learning about who is attacking these systems of ours.
Dare I say the interface looks a little bit like Kibana?
It does. And the language, so if we go, let's go ahead and run our first query here. So under Sentinel now, in the logs section, you can see my history of queries that I've been running over the last few days. But again, we've copied some useful ones out to GitHub here. So in GitHub now, we're going to run this first query. It's basically saying, well, what's been going on with our failed logons over the last 24 hours? So this first query we're going to drop into Sentinel. It's just a copy, paste, and run. And then the theory goes, hopefully we get back some interesting data that we can say, oh, look, we're seeing these spikes in data over time. This is probably going to tell me you've got way too many results of interest. Do you want to parse this down a little? Do you want to give me a better query?
Wait. In 24 hours, we've had more than 30,000.
Yeah.
4625.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're going to see. So this is another scary thing about exposing anything to the internet. And from our perspective, if you expose something to the internet and then hire us, we're going to try to break into that thing, and we'll probably send 10,000, 20,000 guesses during our time with you.
I just had a pen test, and the customer, we did the external, and the customer said, they give us the scope and everything for the external. We did our scans, and we came back saying, hey, can you validate the scope? Because we didn't get any open ports when we did the external. They said, oh, yeah, we just wanted to make sure. Well, that's pretty strong. That's pretty strong.
It's fantastic. That's so fantastic. So here's kind of these events over time. You see these spikes up to 2, but we have a pretty constant stream of 1 happening all the time. So there's a failed logon happening in event logs every second of every day, all the time. And this is just against our 2 RDP servers. So we have 2 RDP systems with failed logons telling us that there is a constant stream with occasional spikes of up to 3 guesses per second. And it is terrifying. If you don't have strong password policies in place and you don't have multi-factor authentication, you will eventually fall and you will eventually be in the news.
So when we do a password spray at BHAS for one of our customers, we very much follow a strict guideline in terms of how many times we try a password per user account per value of time, right? The internet doesn't care. So I've always been curious because it's a denial of service attack, and we don't do denial of service attacks, but if you do go and find Recon, right? Recon, an organization, find all of their usernames. And if they have an exposed service, you can lock out all of their accounts if they have a lockout policy just by having an exposed service. It's kind of scary.
It is very scary.
It's a risk that never really gets stated in any reports I've seen.
No, and one of these queries, we will look at the usernames that are being guessed, and it's if you had an administrator account on a box, expose the internet, it will be locked out. It is a guarantee. And it will stay locked out because they keep it. It's just this stream of disaster.
No, you said they. We're going to bring they into it.
That's fair. I probably shouldn't have gone there. So anyway, what we're looking at now is a slightly different query where we are saying, tell me the IP address, the number of events associated with that IP address. And this is just 12 hours. So we are saying this little tiny block at 87, 251, 67 has hit our system 5,422 times in the last 12 hours. That is 43,000 seconds. So they're guessing a password against us every 8 seconds. It's ridiculous to think about how brute force some of our adversaries are these days. And so if you just go down the chain, we're looking at a crazy number of authentication attempts per time slot.
So I know what to do. I'm going to take that IP address. I'll dump it into VirusTotal, or I'll dump it into IP Void, and I get back where it's from, right? So I know that it's in Poland. Great.
There's your attribution. Well done.
Anything,
bravo.
I mean, we used to say anything east of Poland, but now I guess we have to go anything east of Germany. But where does that land us at, right? So first off, the whole idea of geo-blocking, right, has always been, I kind of want to say it's a pseudo rule because it works. The problem is that ASNs can change, geographic areas can change, but if you don't have employees in Poland, the first way to circumvent this attack might be to block all of Poland, right? And if you do have someone that still needs to get access, then you drop them into a VPN scenario where you can validate their system using multiple device management or a zero trust scenario, right?
We do have a really cool trick where we build, this is again attributed to one of our students who helped us build a geographic tool to look up an IP address and then place it on a map. What was really cool about the map, we call it a heat map, is you can sort by valid login along with failed login. And then so if you throw out the failed logons and you have a valid logon coming from Moscow or Beijing or some other place you have no employees, it's a really scary look.
Now it's an IR, and now it's an incident.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's an incident for sure. So that query we just ran basically said, I want to look at two types of events, one of them being failed logon, and then one of them being like, I think this is Kerberos account validation. And this is basically a system saying, hey, system over there, will you try to validate this account for me instead of actually guessing the credential? I don't know why they're classified slightly differently. Slightly different interaction mechanism as you authenticate to a system. So we end up with a couple different interesting event IDs there. So next up, we're going to look back at that failed login, and we're going to say, go ahead and sort this by whoever was targeted. And we're going to see some username activity, which is kind of interesting. And you know, when you expose things to the internet, you don't really know what they're going to guess. And so here you see
Could you imagine
15,000 guesses against administrators.
Could you imagine doing this in the event viewer?
Sorry.
Could you imagine doing this in the event viewer?
Oh my God.
Or even PowerShell?
It's a crazy thought. So this is another interesting look at the usernames that are being guessed against our boxes. Very generic, very general. Are we? Sorry, I wasn't even looking. We are. Ryan, brilliant work back there, by the way. Acronis, this is an interesting one. This is an account used for imaging and image management on systems where like I boot my laptop and I want to go back to that golden state. You might use Acronis for that. Remote usuario, like a username in Spanish.
Talk about the metadata behind this, though. We now are able to take an IP address and associate it with a password spray that used a fairly static set list of usernames, right?
Yeah.
What can we gain about information about the fact that that static list of usernames was attempted on a password spray? Where did that username list come from? Right. And it seems like, you can go to SecList or whatever and you can get one.
User. Yep. That's interesting. Backup support, of course, like warehouse is probably in here. Print user, admin 1, all of these things like Azure admin, they know we're sitting out on Azure or Azure somewhere. I don't know. How do you pronounce that?
Azure?
Yeah. All right.
Blue, right?
Azure. But anyway, guys, names like Matt, Claudia, Peter, and just these are a constant stream of guesses against names that may or may not exist.
Did I see a DO Lab one in there by chance?
DOAZ Lab, yeah, that's an interesting one. And this is what happens when you expose an NTLM challenge authentication to the internet. You can actually just interact with the service, give it fake data, and then get back enough information to glean the domain name, the internal domain name. So
we went now from, bear in mind that we went from, this is like opportunistic. It's just, let's say you're trying to log in as John. Well, it doesn't matter what domain it is.
Targeted.
That one's targeted. Someone went through the effort
of some math.
Yeah, they went through the method of trying to find the domain name and then going to find it. Now, dirty secret on this is that they could go to the ARM template and find the password. But there's that.
Yeah. And that's why that heat map comes into play. It's like we can look at failed and we can look at valid and we can filter failed and we can say, we got people logging into these boxes. It's time to blow them up.
Yeah, by the time that we would see a successful login, it means someone was able to attribute one of these VMs back to DOAZ Lab, go read the Git repo that has the credential in it, and then use that to log in, right? And at some point, an attacker should say, well, this just looks like it was a lab environment. There's probably not much there. But regardless, it still might be beneficial.
So this next one is going to take in the targeted account and include a source IP. So now we're stepping up and we're combining who is guessing what. I don't know. Should we expand this maybe a little bit? Let's go 48 hours. Let's see what happened over the last 48. And we're getting to the geo stuff. I got to re-click that run button. So we're getting to the geo stuff. And I would also point out, how fast was that query?
It was really fast.
That was like 3 seconds and it sorted 25,000 results.
I don't know how much data is in here yet. Right. It's been a while, but it was fast.
It was very fast. And I really do we don't get charged in Microsoft for using Sentinel to query. You get charged for Sentinel as a service, You do not get charged for the queries.
With exception if you add the AI stuff. There is
That
AI
true,
stuff
and
you have to
machine
pay for
learning,
compute.
Yep, fair. Very fair.
But it's interesting from the perspective of Jordan and I always used to say, well, let's do open source only in our classes. And eventually we kind of came to a pivot point. We're like, well, what's out there commercially available? And we had a couple ways to go. Obviously, we looked at Splunk, right? But then we also looked at Sentinel. And there's other options out there too. But when we started looking at it, I wouldn't call Microsoft Sentinel cost prohibitive. I'm not saying Splunk is either, but there is cost involved with it, right?
But yeah, there's a very significant difference in my opinion between the two. I said that quietly. Splunk is expensive, and it's because they do such a good job of helping you get on your feet.
Yeah.
Making sure all of your data is
valid.
flowing. Like Microsoft is like, here's the platform.
Here's all your tools. Good luck.
Very much so.
So is Sentinel free?
Not exactly.
Almost.
Okay.
Almost. Until you start using it and spending it grows over time, and thus the storage associated with your SIEM. It's almost like any cloud provided SIEM.
You're paying
It's
for
based
retention.
on storage. Yep.
Yeah, storage and retention is what you're paying for there.
So
Gotcha.
next up, this next query here, this one is where we're going to start looking at where these are on the planet. Now, we attribute this to a kid named Pierce, who we have a lot of respect for. He took our class. I think he liked our class, but he also made us really significantly more intelligent and wiser about the platform and how it works. He is very, very, very smart.
He finished the labs fast, and he's like, hey, I'm going to write you guys something really quick.
Yeah, a shout out to Pierce, who has been in our hearts since we met him as a student. What he's doing here and what we are sharing with you now is basically a request that goes out to GitHub and grabs a GeoIP list in CSV format, and then compares those results to what we see in our event logs, and then outputs geo stuff. So this is just, in my opinion, absolutely brilliant. And when I share this with people, like I was sharing that with some people who were here, everybody just looks at it and is like, oh my gosh, this is valid threat intelligence data for the masses that we could build now, today, and use to protect our systems and services. So anyway, for the masses, a really simple query, which, I don't really know how to pseudocode this in other languages, but basically what we're doing is pulling the IP address that made the failed request out of our event IDs that Windows stores by default, compares that to the geo list, assigns a map, and then we are pulling out some more data and saying, holy crap, this block right here has guessed 16,000 times in the last 48 hours against our networks. This is probably something we should just not allow to hit our systems anymore.
No, I remember like the fix for when someone needed remote access is it's port forward 3389. It's fine. No,
Not fine.
not anymore. Well, I don't think it was fine back then either. But
So yeah. Anyway, this is a scary query. Your data will look like this too if you have systems and services exposed to the internet. The thing is, we probably have kept our head in the sand a long time, and we might not know. You might not know that this data exists in standard Windows logs. So let's go look at SSH, because SSH also includes something like this. And we got just a couple more queries to share with you. But this one is like, it was a tweak on the original RDP. I took his logic, so I am still calling it Pierce's SSH.
oh, I want to point out that 87 IP address for you is reporting as Russia.
Are you seeing it? You're seeing it in Poland.
I saw it as Poland, which is interesting because,
This data set probably needs updated.
or vice versa.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
I said ASNs kind of move around, and I think you get to certain areas and they probably start to lose their validity anyway.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is a different perspective. Not the same systems and services are coming after our SSH box. And it's a very different look at who's coming after our SSH box. So who's this? Like, to me, I would bet this is either Amazon or Azure.
Let's take it into the context of like pulling metadata out of what an attack looks like.
Yeah.
We now know that the attacks that are coming through on RDP look significantly different from the attacks coming through on SSH. They're coming from different places. They're probably using different username lists, right? Obviously, for Linux, you'd use something else. But what does that tell you in terms of who is attacking? Now, most of these attacks are probably still opportunistic, right? It's still good to know. But why are they different? Those are questions I feel like have value in being asked.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and sort by country name here and look at these kind of outliers. So we're getting quite a few from Australia. Seems odd, but you don't really picture some of these countries as adversarial, though they all host cloud services and they all have hosting providers.
And probably all of them have botnets infected as well.
That's true. That is very
They come
true.
from the land down under.
I'm not going to touch that. I want to, but I'm not going to.
I was going to ask why Joff was attacking us, but I guess.
Oh, that's funny.
It's not most
I know why Joff is attacking us, because he's a world-class hacker.
He is.
So anyway, we see some interesting data here in SSH2, and it's a different perspective on your sys logs. Your sys logs also contain incredibly valuable data if you can kind of extract what's useful and then compare that to something like a geolist.
What I think is really cool about this is we're using it here just to pull a CSV file of all the different ASNs back to a geographic location. This could be expanded out to use any number of those services where you submit an IP address to an API call that gives you back tons of information about that, right? And you can start to augment your threat feed intelligence based off this IP address with that information as well. Not just geographic location, but you can get into whether or not they're included on denial lists on the public internet, and start cross-checking those against other threat feed intelligence lists, all inside of KQL, right? And that's, I think, a lot of the power of it too. Now, the other piece of this is what's interesting about Sentinel, and we're not going to demonstrate it today, but we've gone through and we showed maybe like what a password attack looks like, right? Password spray. The ability to automate reactions based off of that, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so powerful.
So if you have a SIM, it's kind of containerized. You have people looking at it. The SOC's going to look at it. They have to respond to something. They see a password spray and say, oh, this IP address, maybe it's not good. At some point, you can start to automate that. And Sentinel has an entire platform for that, where any of the agents are installed. You can say, okay, maybe go update all the host-based firewalls on all the systems to start blocking this IP address, et cetera. And these are things that can be automated all inside of Sentinel. So that's the other part of it that's really awesome, is that it's not just an endpoint for all these logs. It's more than that. You can start to do some automated reaction on it.
Yeah, another one that I really like is Sentinel's ability to define, just like you're saying, automated tasks. But like, we believe a system connected out to a C2 server, you can lock that system from future logins. You can pull memory. You can power it off. You can just perform automated actions that would kick off your
runs a script
IR processes.
Runs a script that drops it into
does an
isolated
dump on a
VLAN,
process and
isolated VLAN, pull the memory on it, put it into a lock state, prepare it for IR, all automatically.
It's really hard to argue with how awesome the platform is, and getting if you're like I hate saying this out loud. I am still blue oriented. No matter how I look at a problem as a hacker, I am thinking how I would defend against myself. It's, there's Microsoft gets grief, and sometimes that is probably deserved because of how much they're collecting and how closed source some of those collection mechanisms are. But they're really good.
Think about that. Like, every application you run on your system, default configuration Windows, it's shipping that information off. And for the benefit of everybody else, I guess, is the thing.
I would like to point out that we are not sponsored by Microsoft.
No, we do sell some tea. No, we're not sponsored by Microsoft.
We're not sponsored by the tea company either.
Like, the last 3 minutes was just like the best Microsoft ad I had ever seen, and I just wanted to be very clear.
That.
I know.
Very, very clear. We are sponsored by Antisyphon Training and Black Hills.
They could at least send us some free T-shirts or something.
I know, right? I would like that. Well, I don't know if I would, because you get so much grief. Wait, you're wearing a Microsoft shirt? Do you like them?
No.
Okay. We got 2 queries left here to get through. We're almost there. So this is another interesting perspective on failed logons, and this being specifically inclusive of a workstation name. So I picture this, like, I'm trying to imagine the operator sitting behind workstation 36606 and going, today I'm going to run these scripts against the world, and probably take somebody down every hour or 2, if I had to guess. That operator 36606 is a very dangerous adversary you wouldn't want to mess with. Probably physically, I don't even know. This person scares me. And it's a constant stream of data. And not only is 36606 coming after us, they have done some digging, right? They know our domain. They have like taken that step of gaining details about the underlying system and domain and are targeting us.
I will tell you, like, everyone that's gone through some sort of breach will acknowledge that they feel not only vulnerable to that, but
It's brutal out there.
yeah, it's not a good feeling.
No, it's not. And so what we have here is a collection of like the system that is being reported as coming after us. Like I'm guessing we'll see stuff in here. Like if I sort, I think I can sort by this field. So if we sort like here's some Windows VM, you can like here's 36. I'm going to go ahead and say that Workstation Name 36606 is the scariest one out there. It has hit us almost constantly. So anyway, what we're looking at there is just a different perspective on the same log data. We're looking at our failed logon events and parsing out information. And you can use this too, again, to build those actionable intelligence things that feed your organization better defense. And our last one for today. This one is going to group a user list. So it's kind of neato to see who guessed which names. And so we can see these lists of users that were guessed by some particular entity. Now imagine coupling this with the geo lookups. So we could say Poland is really probably using a user list like this. Russia's user list is pretty close to this.
But what happens if you have two IP addresses that use the same user list? Are they the same attacker?
Yeah, interesting. Have we identified 2 prongs on a botnet? Maybe 4. I don't know. It's crazy out there. It really, truly is. And seeing this stuff in like real time should give you chills because it scares me, and I do this for a living, and you should be scared too.
Don't expose anything on the internet.
We're past that point in life. You
Or
shouldn't do it.
acknowledge that it will be attacked, I guess, if it is.
Immediately, thousands of times every second for the remainder of that service's lifetime.
Yeah.
Thank you for being very clear and direct.
Oh, they cut on the camera.
Oh, it's a shame. It's a shame.
And that's how you give a cat a bath.
Speaking of cats, go ahead and do the cat sound again. There's a lot of new people here. Wow. There it is. That's solid. But is that all you wanted to show today?
That's it today. And all that stuff is out there. So it's just pulling data out of your failed login events because there's stuff you can use in there.
I think that's the thing, though. It's all there already. This is stuff you already have.
Yeah, it is. You just got to figure out how to collect it, how to parse it. And Sentinel is a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah. And White Cyberduck said, psst, 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 psst. Since you're a kitty.
Not with that kind of cat, you don't do that.
You're a kitty.
That's how you lose house cats.
Yes.
Well, anyone have any questions? Feel free to ask them now. Serena, you got any questions for anybody?
Oh my gosh. That is a very good question. I have not visited the .z version of Azure, but I do like Azure.com, ure.com. I would recommend it with 2 thumbs up.
Is this like whitehouse.com?
I don't even think about it. That needs to just drive
I think I would like to end the stream before we go any. I got Serena over here asking like, Jason, do you know what this term is? I'm like, what?
Almost. Yep.
I've gotten too old on the internet, everybody. I am too old on the internet.
It's fine. Apparently, I don't know how to turn on a laptop, so.
Oh, don't do that. Are you going to finish that story, or are you going to tell a little bit?
No, I'm just going to tell everyone
there.
that you thought that I couldn't turn on a laptop.
That's not what we thought at all, but it sure looked like it.
No, like the thought crosses your mind, like, okay, what about the circuit breakers in the house? Like, what else could be?
Yeah, did she just not want to power it on? Is she
to
shipping
be
it back?
fair, I didn't let it power drain because I was like, I don't know, I just didn't think about it, and I had it plugged into the outlet.
And
so.
Jeremiah's a tech, and that's his job, so he got to sort that out for us.
Is that the one that's like torn apart out there?
It might be at this point, yeah.
Don't worry, you guys can handle like the Windows event logs, and I'll handle the more complicated stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll take that off your
I'll
your
go back to being a blue teamer. It's easy, right? It's really easy to defend against adversaries who are trying to knock your door down with a bowling ball every day.
Well, as a reminder,
mowing grass is easy until you have to like start the engine on the mower with like the whole thing, and then you realize that's not easy either.
Well, before you go today, just want to remind you that Kent and Jordan do teach for Antisyphon, and they're fantastic at it. And then they do it privately sometimes. And when I say privately, they show up to a place that asks them to come. It's not like they go to someone's house and just privately train them, I guess.
I actually do that secretly, and
It's
somebody
like a tooth
put me
fairy.
golfing because of some advice I gave him. Yeah, that's true.
I'm
It's
a
scary,
private
but yeah.
trainer.
We did do some private training recently, and we went there, and I was like, yeah, we got an Airbnb, and I didn't realize where we were going. It was a relatively small town, and they're like, we have Airbnbs here, and I was like, oh no, what did I rent? But yeah, it's we do that. We're gonna have a class at Wild West Hacking Fest too. So
Got to get on down there to that Wild West Hacking Fest. It's the best darn conference in Deadwood.
I assume you mean
that
up
deals
here.
with. Oh yes, up there for sure.
Up here, up into the northern tier of the Great Plains.
I love landing at Rapid City, where all of a sudden you look out the window and you're like, "Where? There's nothing out here. There's nothing. And then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, there's the town. There it is. All right, there's
Off
that.
in the distance on the horizon.
Yeah,
and then you have another hour to drive to get to Wild West Hacking Fest.
yeah, yes." But when you turn down that road, one of the things I love about that road is it tells you how many people have died on that road.
Did you see who just commented, by the way?
Hey, it's Pierce.
It's Pierce. It's the Pierce.
The Pierce.
The Pierce.
The
We're
Pierce.
gonna call you out every time, man, for the rest of time. You deserve it. You're a very, very smart individual. We appreciate you sharing with us as well and making the industry more secure.
Yeah. All right. Anybody got anything? Ken, Jordan, got any final words?
No, keep your eyes peeled on your logs. There's useful stuff in there.
And use them. There's a lot of value there.
There is.
And you already own it.
I see a T-shirt now of eyes peeled on a log. Like there's a visual there somewhere. I don't know what it is yet. Serena, any final words?
No.
Could be cheesy right now. That's our job.
You know what? Jordan said that we'd never been intimate. Now, that is true. Okay.
Everybody, right, kill it with fire.
But I want to point out that, like, once
Kill
you
it with
once
fire.
you
Just
start a business together,
kill it with fire an hour, right?
once you start a business together, you go down